If you've sat in that chair, you know that great employees fall in love and move to Alaska, or they get tired of looking at your face and they quit, or you suddenly had a plan and now you're sitting at the office at midnight stuffing envelopes because the person who was, right? I mean, that's ownership. We should create a translation book, Ron. And on one side, we'd have what small business owners say, and on the other side, we'll have what potential buyers hear. And when the owner says, I reinvested all my profits, the buyer hears, you didn't make any money. If you could inject one change into the small business zeitgeist, if you could create one change in the market of small business owners that would result in more small businesses being sellable, is this the thing?
Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. Sponsored by DuDilio. Looking to buy or sell a business? Assembling the right team is essential for success, and that's where DuDilio comes in. DuDilio is the go-to platform for hiring top M&A service providers, including attorneys, deal advisors, and due diligence experts. With a network of over 250 highly vetted professionals and boutique firms, they connect you with the expert you need for a seamless M&A journey. Whether you're acquiring your first business, growing your portfolio, or preparing for a sale, DuDilio makes building your deal team easy and efficient. And best of all, their matching service is completely free. Visit dudilio.com and assemble your winning team today. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How to Exit. Today I'm here with Mike Finger, and he is the founder of Exit Oasis and an advocate for the small business owner. You put out great content all the time. Thank you for being here today. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, Ron, thanks for the opportunity. I always enjoy our conversations.
I like what you put out there all the time. You actually have a cool writing style where it's kind of a story where you have the story punchline of what's happening in the industry, capturing some of the more unique situations that happen all the time, and some of them are unfortunate, right? Where business owners are trying to sell and they're not being told 100% of what's going on by the particular actors in the community and stuff. So. Thank you for taking the time and energy to create that content. I don't know if it's just you or if you have a team like I do or how that comes about, but it's good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny you talk about, is it common? What's the experience of the average owner? You and I both know that success stories are compelling, right? We know that hey, I sold my business in 8 hours for $18 million on a Tuesday, and you can do it too kind of stuff is compelling because I want to learn how to do that. But it doesn't matter which angle you look at this space from. The truth is that most buyers don't buy. Most owners never sell, right? So the most common experience in this space is one where we don't get what we want. And I don't think those stories get told enough, not because we want them to be the example, but because we don't define from my place, we don't define for owners well enough the reality of their current position. And most of us as owners live in this fantasy space of whenever I'm ready, I'll be able to sell. And to me, that does such a disservice to the owner, but also does a disservice to the buyer, because as you and I both know, there's not as many buyable businesses out there as any of us hoped there would be.
Yeah, I don't know how many times we go through looking at stuff and just realize it's just not ready. Like I'm helping a roll up right now trying to buy cabinetry companies, and we've had conversations with at least a dozen owners, and not a single one of them are where they should be by this point, right? Even if they have numbers are numbers, though some of the numbers are impressive enough to get the phone call, right?
Yep.
They have the numbers to get the phone call, but they don't have the rest of what we're going to talk about today. Now, you know this from firsthand, and just because I know you from previous experience and I know your backstory a little bit, not everybody on the audience does. So let's do that real quick. Let's cover your origin story. How did you end up in this space? And some of the lessons you learned as to why you're doing what you're doing now and helping others.
Sure. Started a business in the mid 90s. My wife and I cut our dining room table in half to make two desks and started serving clients out of our living room. Turns out I'm a bit of a growth junkie, and long story short, a decade later, I've got 50 full-time employees, and I wake up one morning and I look in the mirror and I'm a crispy piece of toast looking back. I had done the 7 days a week, 18-hour a day thing, and I was ready to be done. And that's when I had my personal, what do you mean I can't sell my business moment? Broker after broker said, too owner dependent, not enough cash flow, fix this, this, and this, and call me back in 3 years. And, found myself at unquestionably the lowest point professionally, but also retrospectively, it was a pivot point for me because it was that point where I looked and said, okay, enough of the surface learning. What does it really look like for a small business to be sellable? What does a buyer look for when they look to buy a business? And so I went back in the trenches, and 5 years later, I've still got essentially the same sized business, but the features were different, right? Profitability was different. Owner dependence was different. All of those factors that make that business potentially buyable for a buyer. And we were lucky enough to be able to sell the business. That was a freaking life do-over for me, a huge opportunity for me to step back and genuinely explore what it is that I found engaging and satisfying. I'd like to tell you I figured that out right away. That's not the case. I worked as a business broker for a year, loved part of that, hated part of that. Ran a startup and growth incubator for 3 years, helping startup and growth companies start up and grow faster. Loved part of that. Got exposure all the time to small business owners, realized I missed that ownership thing. Went back and subsequently bought and sold two small businesses as turnarounds. And then after that last sale, realized that I loved this transition space, but that I carry ownership really heavy. And so looked to be in a space where I could walk alongside owners who were interested in prepping their business for sale. I'm not a broker. I don't care if somebody ultimately decides to sell. The goal is to get a business to a place where you can own it forever or sell it tomorrow. And so that's the work I do now. Is I'm a coach for small business owners interested in having a business that they could sell if they wanted to.
A lot of business owners don't get that. They don't get that if it's ready to sell properly and it's a great company to sell, a lot of the reasons why you would have sold it might have went away, right? If you're selling a business to retire, but a lot of times, even I talk to these business owners, I want to retire, but I still like to come around and help. I enjoy certain parts, and I want to come around and help for those. So they still want to work 4 or 5 hours a week, doing advising and stuff. And I was like, well, if you had it truly ready to sell, and you had a general manager in there, and you were doing that, you could still own the entire thing. Stop by a couple, 3-4 hours a week to do your advising, and the income would still be there for you.
Right.
You're given it'd be a little less because you had to pay somebody to do your role, but there's a Well, only one gentleman in all these interviews, I've done well over 300 interviews now, he had the idea, well, I'm not going to sell my business to retire. I'm going to acquire to retire. And I was like, what do you do? What do you mean by that? And he says, I'm going to buy a competing business down the road. I've been talking to him for a while. He runs his business so much smoother than I, and he keeps wanting me to mentor him. I'm going to buy his company. I'm going to own both, and this guy's already agreed to it. And then I'm going to retire out and just be the advisor of both companies. And he's going to do what he wants. He's going to grow them both. That's what he wants to do. And I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah,
Acquire to
interesting.
retire. So
Ownability is sellability, right? And that's the dirty little secret of this space is that if your business has the characteristics that make it possible and probable to sell, then that's a great business to sit back and own forever. And it is that pain of ownership is that it's so interesting. I don't know what the percentage is, but so many of us as small business owners, myself included, we view a certain pain level as a prerequisite of ownership, right? That I got to carry this weight, I've got to carry this stress, I've got to do this, and this, and that's just the cost of ownership. And we make that the norm of how we engage the operations we run. And the truth is, it just doesn't have to be that way. That's a choice. How I'm going to run this business, how I'm going to operate it, those are choices. We as owners, and only we as owners, get to change that if we decide to.
So, what are some of the initial things, the low-hanging fruit that some people can? Let's just dive into what is it? What makes a business sellable, and what makes it remote manageable, or where you could own it for eternity and pass it on to your children and stuff. What are some of the key elements that you see?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I break it down to three real basic questions. And I do it that way, Ron, because I think like many owners, I got lost in the complexity of this space, right? This formula, that criteria, if I want to sell to private equity, I need X, Y, and Z. And we begin to believe that there's this hidden sorcery that determines whether a business is sellable or not. And so for me, when I sat down and I started looking at this, it was a process of whittling. How do I get rid of everything that's important so I can focus on what's critical? And so again, for me, three basic questions. Question number one, are your results desirable? Are the financial results that your business generates at the end of the year, and I call that out specifically, is what hits your tax return desirable to a potential buyer? I don't mean were you profitable in the first quarter and the second quarter and the third quarter and then spent down all the profit and ended up with a zero on the bottom. Are your results desirable? If they are, we've taken a huge step towards creating a sellable business. You alluded earlier, the numbers are the numbers. If they're not, we've created a huge barrier to selling the business. So number one, are your results desirable? Number two, can a buyer duplicate your results? If I walk through the door and you walk out the door, is it likely that the end of that year looks like the end of the previous year? And what we're getting to there is owner dependence, right? We're asking questions like, did you build a system? Did you build a team? Are these things, is this information, are the formula that result in the desirable results, do those live somewhere other than your own head? So are your results desirable? Can a buyer duplicate your results? And last but not least, can you document your results? And to me, I think that's probably it's the saddest one. If you find an owner who can answer yes to the first two questions, but their record keeping is so bad that they can't prove it to me anyways, it's, again, a non-starter, because I can't go to the bank and say, well, hey, Ron says that he makes a lot of money in this business, so you should loan me the money to buy it. So those three basic questions, and I don't use that as okay, now there's 17 other things we should talk about. If you can answer yes with a capital Y to each of those three questions, you are well on your way to sellability. If you get a no or a maybe or sometimes, now we know where we're spending our time. That's the low-hanging fruit.
A lot of people don't get that running a business day over day to be your income source, to be your lifestyle business, and running a business that you want to present as well as, to sellers are two distinctly different things when it comes to the taxability. You brought this up at the beginning. At the fourth quarter of most years, most businesses do everything they can to minimize what their tax is going to look like the next year. Right? They're going to buy new equipment, stretch, some growth acquisitions and stuff like that of equipment and everything, so that they won't have to pay as much of a tax burden. And they don't get that we need to see the tax returns on top of whatever you claim your books are. So that's something you have to. And I'm not saying neglect equipment or do anything like that, but be aware, being aware that your true profit, that your taxable profit, your seller discretionary earnings, or the big fancy word that people like to throw around, the EBITDA. If that's not there, then we just assume that you're not running the business very well.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. I mean, we should create a translation book, Ron. And on one side, we'd have what small business owners say, and on the other side, we'll have what potential buyers hear. And when the owner says, "I reinvested all my profits," the buyer hears, "You didn't make any money." Right? They're different words, but they get interpreted differently, and that's, call it a change of perspective. But it's funny. I'm working with a couple owners right now. One in particular that comes to mind, where these owners are in the place of transformation on that front end, where they're going from a place where it's real lean to a place where we're actually making money. And one of the things I have to watch for, and I'm talking it through with this one owner in particular, is that his mindset is such that the end of the year is going to be zero or lower. And right now we're, at the end of the third quarter, and we're at 120 grand on the bottom line. And it's like, no, it's going to grow from there, right? We're changing the dynamic. This is going to be different and feel different, which means we have to act different. And that is that's a big part of this from my experience, is how owners interact with the business. Not just how the business operates, it's how I view what's happening and the decisions that I then make and how they impact that P&L.
Most of the time, when we come across the other side of it, is a lot of small business owners. They just, especially in the trades such as home services or small manufacturing and stuff, I would say in that $2 million in revenue or less, their accounting practices are less than desired also. They do their accounting just enough to keep their tax person off their back,
Right.
right? So the tax thing can get done, but I would say it shocked me, but it doesn't, because I grew up a painter's son, who my dad owned a painting business. I ran it from the time I was 16 to the time I was 20. I've owned probably 3 or 4 businesses before I went and got my first college degree. And until after college, I didn't know what a balance sheet or an income statement was. My dad never used them, right?
Right.
My dad quite literally took a bag of receipts to the tax man at the end of the year. And when I took it over when I was 16 and dropped off those bag of receipts, he said, "Could you please do this every month or so?" Right? Like giving me, I mean, literally, I'm not joking. It was no joke. They were somewhat organized. They were in envelopes inside of the bag, but it was a brown paper grocery bag that had gathered all the receipts for the previous year, and Dad had sorted them into like manila envelopes for each month. So each month he would just take an envelope and stuff that month's worth of receipts in there, invoices
Yep.
and supplies and receipts from people paying stuff, and he would print out a bank statements and the receipts and shove it all in that bag and hand it to our tax guy. And I thought bookkeeping, until I joined the military and went and got a college degree, I thought bookkeeping was handing your tax guy your bank statements and all your receipts.
Right.
And too many of these businesses, and I laugh about it now, but so many of these businesses we come across, that's what when you ask them that, hey, can you show me your quarterly bank statements where they do that. But if you ask them for income statements, balance sheets, or any standard accounting practice type of stuff, if they're under $2 million in revenue and haven't prepped themselves for sale, they just kind of get glossy-eyed.
Absolutely. And it's interesting as you tell that story because I can flash through the mental Rolodex of literally hundreds of businesses I've come across where that's the case. But the truth is, it's the second belief that causes the problem. The first belief is this is how I can run my business. Okay, good, bad, otherwise. The second belief is I don't need a retirement fund because I'm going to sell my business to fund my retirement. Okay? The problem is that there's a massive disconnect from the first belief to the second belief. If you want to just own a job and you hate doing bookkeeping and that's just how you want to run your business, okay. I mean, you and I both know lifestyle business owners who are just gonna do it that way until they shut the door and go on to whatever's next. Fine. But if you have a secondary belief that's dependent on selling your business or exiting successfully or transitioning, if anything in your brain is pegged on that needing to happen, then we've got a huge problem with that front part. And to me, the problem is that you've got a lot of those owners who run things the way you just described, who also believe about what comes next. And that to me is it's just tragic, right?
And there's something to be said for that. I guess there's an old saying even that which is measured is improved upon, right? Seeing monthly income statements, balance sheets, understanding what's on them, in most cases truly helps a business, right? Some of these business owners would probably scare them, rightfully so, right?
Yep.
They do, I've had business owners go back and there was one or two businesses, they were just so good. I was like, look, you're making lots of money, you've got decent, you're not, he gave me his bank accounts, and it's not like he's frivolously spending out of his bank account like he kept his personal expenses out of it and stuff. I said, with a decent, accountant, even a decent bookkeeper, we can go back and recreate or create your last 3 years of books. What I need and what we need to make you bankable. Like if I'm going to use a bank loan, we're going to have this anyway. It's going to take a couple of months, but it's worth the expense to hire a bookkeeper to do this for you. And they start getting their past monthly income statements and all this stuff turning in. Get the bookkeeper teaches them how to read that, and they'll even blatantly tell me over the phone, I don't know how I made it through some of these months. Had I seen how bad it was run for those 4 months there, like how negative I was, I might have given up. So maybe there's something to be said for not knowing what kind of condition you're in. It's like prefer it. Like they say, if you're in hell, keep going. Maybe you'll get out before the devil even knows you there, right? I think so. There's something to be said for that, because there's been a couple of business owners where, had they known where they truly were at the moment that they were there, maybe they wouldn't have made it. But because they were so into the mix and trying to get by and trying to pulling off all the stops, and they weren't focused on how ugly it was, they pushed through all of it. They had perseverance and got to the other side. But that doesn't translate to sellable, right? At some point, we need to see that month over month, how it's running. Here's another reason that a lot of people miss. Almost every business on this planet is cyclical in some state. Either it's yearly, it has yearly cycles where there's certain months it's really big, really small. Everything from government contracting businesses to lawn care and pest control companies have life cycles. And without your book, and in different markets and different climates and everything else, those change, right? Yeah. I owned a pest control company in Oklahoma. I promise you the life cycle of that would be different now that I'm in California if I fired up one here, right? Yeah. Different critters are here. We don't have dry wood termites in Oklahoma, right? They don't exist. And here they do. So year round, in Oklahoma, all the termites have to go into the ground and hibernate during the winter. So during the winter, we don't get any termite jobs because nobody sees them crawling around. Nobody sees the fallout. Nobody freaks out. Termite inspections even come back negative when they shouldn't sometimes. That said, out here, it's different. the same thing goes with all these businesses. There's life cycles inside of these businesses and stuff. One of the reasons as a buyer we demand seeing proper books, history, 3 years worth of history and stuff, is we need to determine, like a SWOT analysis, risk and rewards. What is the life cycle of this business? I've seen more than one business try to sell me like, oh yeah, the last 6 months have been great, and when I finally look at their stuff, yeah, they do all their business from Thanksgiving to Christmas, and they're trying to sell it to me on January 1st.
Right.
And they want to pull all the money out of the company, and I'm going to have to pay salaries until Thanksgiving because the company makes $0 profit until Thanksgiving comes rolling around again, right?
So Ron, here's the question that brings to mind for me. Do owners not do that? Do the small business owners that don't look at their financials or run things that way, do they not do it because they don't know better? Or because they know but don't really care? Or are they just too busy? Is this a lack of knowledge? Hey, did you know if you actually looked at the dashboard on your car, you wouldn't get as many speeding tickets? Oh, I had no idea. Or is there something else at work there?
I think there's something else at work there, and I think it's human psychology, right? To some extent, we're resistant to certain things. I can tell you, I've got both. I was forced to take accounting in my undergrad, and in my master's. My MBA is in marketing, so I've had at least 2 accounting classes in undergrad and 2 accounting classes in my master's, and I don't enjoy it. I never enjoyed it then. To this day, I still pay somebody else to do it for me. All right, but I'm now, and even until I got into mergers and acquisitions, I would probably say most of my business books were a mess. Right now that I'm in this, it makes a lot more sense. We have somebody do bookkeeping for our stuff. We kind of know where we're at a little bit better than we ever have before. I'm 53, so I've learned some lessons over the years. I think before that, it was just psychological for me. I've got to get to the next hurdle, right? I got to get the next sale. Right, there's this mortgage to be paid or this house to close. I had a real estate investment firm. We got to close this.
Did you think it was unimportant at that time?
It was less important than closing the next transaction. Like there was a time and energy of my focus, and as a business owner, a lot of times you focus on what you can accomplish, and I think it's a fallacy to some extent, but you think if I just get this next closing, there's will be $30,000 there. That covers all the bills, and the rest of it doesn't make it doesn't really matter because I pushed the problem down the road far enough. That gives me.
Sure.
We're looking at runway, right? If I close this deal, that gives me 3 more months of runway. Surely I'll close more deals in the next 3 months. So
sure.
We kind of know in our own head what the run rate is. What our company costs to run every month, what payroll costs, what. Everything else. And if you get to the mode where, you're trying to do something, you kind of know it's kind of like managing a bank account without a checkbook. Many of the same business owners do the same thing. If I ask them to see their personal checkbook, they won't have one, right? I didn't for years, right? I could just tell you what's in. I can tell you right now what's in all my accounts. We have these phones and we look at them 3-4 times a day.
Right.
So,
right.
So we don't keep checkbooks as often as we used to. The problem with that is when it comes down and going, where did it all go? Now we got to resort and start digging through bank statements to where used to we'd have a little book in our, thing. And there's something to be said for writing something down. There's a memory correlation that's been proven scientifically that when you take pen to paper, write something down, it triggers certain things in your brain. You remember it better. So I think we're missing out a little bit on not taking these activities, but when it comes down to why business owners do it, I just think it's basic human psychology. A little bit of procrastination and a little bit of not wanting to know where they're at because they think it's not as good as it possibly could be.
Yeah, this brings me back to what we talked about before, a little bit before we started.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the thing? Is it? If you could inject one change into the small business zeitgeist, if you could create one change in the market of small business owners that would result in more small businesses being sellable, is this the thing?
I think it could be. Let's take a look at what's going on in the world right now. There's all this AI and technologies. If banks were to take AI and make an AI app that works with your bank account and says, hey, I see a deposit here. What was it? And the AI asked you stuff. And send this receipt in, send this thing in. And the AI, I think AI could really easily do your standard set of business books. It would be one of the simplest things AI could ever do. Not a CPA level, not tax advising, because that's maybe it could or couldn't do that. But I'm saying at the most basic level of a bookkeeper, a decent AI tool could be a great bookkeeper. And if you had that for every single business, to where if the business had a bank account, it automatically had a decent set of books, by nature, by force, I think a lot of more businesses would be sellable. Because one of the things that we have biggest problem right now is the owner, especially with off-market deals, is the owners panic when you ask for certain things because they don't know how to get to it. And they like, so let me call my person, and then they call their tax rep up and go, hey, I need balance statements, right? Or I need balance sheets, or I need income statements. And a lot of times those guys, they know what they are, but they don't know how to go back and create them from that because they're tax people. That's not what they do. I think it's possible that that's one of the biggest players in this. But, maybe that's kicking the can down the line. Because as soon as we see the books, you can also come back and go, the other two elements are critical too, right? I need to be able to see your history and where you're going and see that it's well run. But being well run also means I've got systems and processes, right? I have less owner dependency, right? I have people on the team that, the owner goes on vacation for a month. Does the business continue to grow, or does it continue? Does it slip?
Yeah, it's interesting with the information piece with the financial data. If you look at the sale of online businesses, Shopify stores or whatever the thing is, and you realize you're now dealing in a marketplace where there's an external validation of the information, it fundamentally changes the ball game, right?
It does, definitely.
We don't have to play the wink, wink, nudge, nudge game anymore. We don't have to wonder if what you're telling me is true. And to me, that's instructive to what it would look like if there was a higher level of financial acumen. But again, the implication there is that a lot of businesses that fail or that don't sell are as a surprise to the owner, and I'm not sure that's the case, right? I think most, even those that are uninformed about the details of their financials, have a fairly good sense that the ship is sinking.
Right. They have the instinct, especially if they've been running it for long enough to know. They know whether or not their status of the business is good, bad, growing, or sinking. Right? They have to. Or they wouldn't. If they made it past 10 years, I'd say they got that knowledge. Right? So it brought to mind, though, when you were talking about this and the Shopify and stuff and all that, one of the things that's real hard for all the online guys to do is the thing that I see a lot. And they say, well, a lot of cash walks in the door. I'm sure you've seen this one, too, where, well, my taxes say this, my books say that, but a lot of cash walks in the door. And I have to go, what do you, and I know what they mean, but I like to say, oh, cool, what do you mean by that? Well, not everything's on the books. I was like, okay, well, you can't have the cake, and eat it too, right? If you don't pay taxes on it, it's not in your books. You're telling, I have one guy say, well, that's about a third of what I really make. So you're saying 2/3 of your business is surrounded by tax evasion?
Right.
He almost hung up the phone on me. But I said it in a laughing way, I laughed to you. So he kind of realized that I was like not being too judgmental because I've heard it before. But he's like, well, it's not tax evasion. I just don't pay taxes on it. I was thinking, okay, kind of the definition of tax evasion.
Well, again, we're back to that translation book, right, Ron? When the owner says, these aren't my real numbers, what an experienced buyer will hear is, I lie to the IRS, but Ron, I'd never lie to you. They can put me in jail, but I'd never lie to you. You should trust me about everything else I've told you about this business.
We were visiting one where they did tinted windows, and we looked at 2 or 3 of these. So a buddy of mine and I looked at a couple, and then I went and looked at a couple of my own. They tint windows for auto dealerships, and they do detailing and put advanced car radios and stuff. And believe it or not, a lot of them are very, very profitable businesses. There's a lot of money in tinting car windows. But So I go into the one guy, and I was like, there are two things that struck me. Is he's like, I would like to work less hours. I was like, so I put that. I said, okay, that sounds cool. He wants to hang around. He wants to stay, keep relationships up with clients. Luckily for me, he was a golf pro too, so a lot of his clients were car dealerships. He'd take them out on the golf course, and that's how I landed him. Well, I don't play golf, so if he wants to continue playing golf with the businesses that he does business with, it'd probably be good. The second thing is when he said, I'd like to spend a lot less hours here. I should have asked how many hours he spent, because it was later on in the conversation, 2 or 3 days later, when I asked the question. I said, well, what does less hours mean to you? He goes, man, I'd love to only have to come into the office 40 hours a week. So I'm like, what exactly are you doing now? He's 75, 80. And I'm like, holy cow. So there were two things going on. One, when I visited the site, I seen at the end of the day, he had 3 employees that came up to the register, and he paid them out of the register at the end of the day.
Yep.
And I'm like, so did you just pay those guys for their, was that, I just seen you hand 3 different people cash. He goes, yeah, they're 1099. I pay them that cash at the end of the day for their hours they put in that day. They bring me their time card, and I pay them out of the register. I said, yeah, but your register isn't tracking that the way that, you think it is, because it's one of the old paper registers, and he just rang it up, no sale, no sale, no sale. It's like, how do you track that? He goes, oh, it's just, I kind of know. I write it down on a log in the office and stuff. So when he told me, like, this company makes a lot more cash than its stuff, he's paying people out, off the table. He's collecting cash off the table, and the only thing that ever makes it to the IRS or credit card receipt, things that are recorded computerly, on the computer. And I was thinking, I just don't want to untangle this, right? And that guy was doing $2.5–3 million a year,
Yeah.
right, out of a shop.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's I've bought businesses where that was happening, but the dynamic of the sale changed fundamentally. It no longer became a relationship of trust. It was no longer a transaction with the owner. It was me navigating my way through the bank and others to see what was the fundamental. And again, long story short, there, I ended up buying that business for 25% of my original offer. And I ended up buying it from the bank when they got it back after a sheriff sale. It was this 18-month epic, and it all broke down because that trust got violated. Because I'm trying to present to you something that is a certain way, and then you find out it's not, and it's just okay, you and I are no longer in a transaction. Now I'm looking to see if I can buy this business out from under you. And it's, again, there are owners out there that do that. There's owners out there that approach this way, but that gets us back to that third question. Can I document my results? And if the answer is no, to your point, you can't steal it twice. You don't get. I'm not going to pay you for your dishonesty. Has it happened? Has someone out there bought, paid a higher price because of the hint, hint, nudge, nudge? Maybe. I know. I mean, there's industries where that happens, where there's other ways to verify. Right? You buy a laundromat and you get the wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Here's the real cash flow here. But now I'm analyzing water bills to determine how many turns are happening on these machines to calculate if the numbers are actually what you claim they are.
Yeah, I was just saying, that's the prime example, right? I can tell that, on a laundromat, I can tell how many gallons of water I paid for on the last water bill, and then I can tell what the average load size for my machine is, and I can kind of, figure that out. And there's some other industries you can do that too, right? But even then, you're opening yourself up to, all that guy had to do is go run around a bunch of empty washers for the lot, two or three times a week, and really skew those numbers if he knows how the industry is doing that. So it's so questionable.
I had a guy, Ron, who, in fact, it was that same situation I was just talking about. Claimed a certain revenue number. Turned out to not be true. Claimed a separate revenue number. I said, screw it. I don't trust a word you're saying. I need to see your bank accounts.
Mm-hmm.
Saw the bank accounts, saw that he was depositing his retirement check. He was a retired pilot. He was depositing his retirement check into the business account, claiming it as revenue, using it to, I mean, it was just this hot mess of, again, you run your business the way you want to run your business. It's the secondary belief that gets you into trouble. I'm going to run my business this way, and I'm going to get paid full price when someone buys it. It's not going to happen.
I actually ran into that one where somebody had a fairly hefty retirement account being deposited into their business, and it was showing up as, trying to show it as part of the revenue. And I just come out and point. At this point, I was frustrated with the guy. I said, "Well, how are we gonna arrange me keeping your retirement income?"
Right? You're going to sign that pension check over to me each month?
Like how are you, like, you're counting it as revenue? I'm buying it as part of the company. What is that going to look like with the whatever trades union or whatever that's coming from? Because they're not going to be happy with continuing to wire that money to me when you're gone, right? This guy was 81. I said, you're 81. And, maybe you'll make it another 19 years, you'll make it to 100, but at some point I'm going to own this business. You're not going to be on this planet anymore, and they're not going to be happy about needing to send me that money every month.
Right.
And he was like, well, you don't get that money. I was like, then why do you think you're going to have it on the income statement as
why
part
should
of the
I
revenue?
pay you for it now? Yeah.
Right. And he's like, will my accountant do that? I was like, I already talked to the accountant, and he said the same thing about you.
Right, right.
So anyway, it happens.
Ron, how often does that happen, do you think? Out of 10 businesses that you come across, how often do you think you're dealing with money under the table?
I would probably say at least 2 or 3 times. It is a lot more rampant. Maybe it's higher than that. It's a lot. I take that back. It all depends on how much business is cash. Touching cash has a tendency to affect small business owners. So, meaning that cash goes in and out fairly easily. I've seen people buy all their supplies. Like my wife and my son run a small business. I tease her all the time. Everything has to go into the account, right? Because a lot of they own a concessions business, and probably a third of they have tap to pay now. So and
Sure.
a payment system for the phones. About a third of their income comes through cash. And then she'll pay her booth rent for that day in cash, and she keeps the receipt. But I was like, everything has to go through the account, right? And I said, I even told her she really shouldn't even be paying the booth rent out of the cash. You should bring a checkbook with you, write a check for that, so it shows up in your bank logs. Because in 2 to 3 years from now, when we want to move, like we're talking about, later on in life, moving away from here, well, we're ready to sell this. We don't want to have to wait 3 years to clean up your books to sell this.
Right.
Right. We want the last 3 books from the day we decide it's okay, this is big enough, we're going to sell this. Like, my son's using it as a learning lesson. My son's 14. He wanted to start a business, so I helped him do it. At some point, he'll be off to college. My daughter won't want to do anything to do with it. My wife will be burned out. It'll be time to sell this thing, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to wait 3 years to clean up everything. Yeah, I think it comes down to cash. The more cash that's involved in a business, the more likely you're going to see that not all of it's on the tax returns, not all of it's in the books. It's just too tempting for most small business owners.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it's, again, I'm sure you've done this math dozens of times, but if you do the math on the savings from if I put that dollar in my pocket and I save the quarter versus if I leave that dollar on the P&L and I get a 3x for my business, saving that quarter cost me $3, right?
Yeah, it's you saved a quarter, so you leave it in the business. That dollar becomes 75 cents, but now when you sell it, you get 3 times that, right? So you get a $2.25 back. So is that right?
Yeah, it's the math doesn't work. Most of us are not. Don't have enough foresight to see 12 years in advance,
right,
that we should stop running things that way. Because it just make some money, pay your taxes, sell your business, make more money. It just I tend towards the simple.
The interesting thing is you just said most people can't see 12 years in advance. Most of us buyers, I'm a buyer. I'm still looking at businesses. I'm a buyer for myself, and I do some roll-up activities where I help roll-ups that are actively purchasing and have made purchases in the past. I don't mess with new guys. But if you've made one or two purchases and you want to continue doing that, I'll go in out and help you do the search, help you do the negotiation. It's something I find it's fun. I do it part-time. That said, the interesting side of it is we're only looking for your last 3 years. Right, and you just said that business owners can't see 12 years down the thing. I tell you, they can't see 5 years down the road, right, or 3 years down the road. The problem is when it comes time for you to need to sell, most of the time it's not a want to sell, right? You have some life event, a divorce, a medical thing. You finally found yourself most burned out. You finally found yourself burned out, and most business owners don't see themselves burning out. It's like one day you woke up and you realize, man, I haven't been running this the way I should have been running it for the last 2 or 3 years. It's declining. I must be burnout. It's a realization of I must be, right? I'm not doing as well as I used to. I must not be into this as much. And by that point, you've heard it. So
even worse, Ron, the scenario where I find a better opportunity.
Yeah, that one happens a lot.
Here's a business I could get into, but I can't get rid of this other one because of the way I've been running it.
Or they start a second business and it starts making more money than the first. I see this often, actually. Somebody's out there, they're doing XYZ, they're making decent money. Somebody asked them to do something else, similar maybe even. And I'll give you a good example. We're running into a few people that own cabinetries, but they live in Florida because that's where the search is. But they have this thing where they're creating custom hurricane-rated storm doors. Those fancy front doors for your house, those doors can run anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 to $80,000 installed, right? So I can either go out and build some kitchen cabinets and profit $5,000 or $6,000 from after I pay for all my labor and manual and design and install and everything else. I can make $5,000-6,000, make a 20% profit margin, or I can design a front door, put it on there, and make a 35 or 40% profit margin on an $80,000 install. So they start doing that on the side. The next thing they know, they got this cabinetry that's in their way. Right. And that happens with the software companies. Happens a lot too. They create a software company that's doing X, Y, and Z, and the next thing you know, they have a little SaaS component that they sell memberships to. That starts to grow and it starts to outpace their previous business. Right. And then they start calling up brokers, going, "Hey, I want to sell this over off and focus on this." And unfortunately, like you said, they got to go back and do a lot of work to make the previous one sellable. So a lot of those end up just getting kind of wrapped up and sold, or they want to steal so many resources from it, it's not sellable. I've seen that way too many times on the software side. Yeah, I want to sell you the software and the IP, but I want to keep all my guys.
Yeah. And again, this brings us back to the whole ownability equals sellability thing, right? Because if I was running the business that way to begin with, not only would it have been easier and more profitable and more benefit, right? But again, we get stuck as owners in that place of this is how I do this, or I don't have any choice, or I get frustrated because whenever I talk about this, I flash back to being that guy. I was running my business that way. I thought it was supposed to be painful. I thought I had to do 80 hours a week, and I didn't. But that was my belief. That's the way I operated the business, and a lot of us as owners get stuck there.
One of the biggest problems I see currently in this space is, from the buyer's perspective, all the buyers I meet with and stuff, is our own buyers' inflated sense of ego. And I get on to people all the time for this because they'll present a deal and like, well, I'm going to fix X, Y, Z and stuff. And I was like, and a lot of these companies, they're second or third generation. I said, so that family's owned that business for 62 years. The current guy's running it. It's been there for 25 years. And you're telling me you've never run a business, but because you have an Ivy MBA, you're going to step out of your educational environment into an operational mechanical environment, and you're going to operate that company better than a 62-year family history and a guy who's been sitting there doing the same thing every day for the last 30 years. You think you're going to improve upon that? Who the hell do you think you are? Right? That's the hell of an ego.
The lack of understanding of the breadth of knowledge that these small business owners have. And I'm sure you've seen it as I have. You see the owner. I'm walking through a factory floor with an owner on the way to his office, and he says, "Give me 1 second," because he hears something from a machine that's across the room that he goes over and he tells the manager to adjust because he knows if he doesn't, the line's going to go down in 20 minutes. Tell me how long it takes your buyer to develop that skill set. Oh, well, the floor guy should do that. Well, maybe he should, but he didn't that time, right? It's like the lack of understanding of the breadth of knowledge. We get these, you see the ads, right? Buy a basic business, buy a simple business, buy a blue collar business. Like, these things are easy to run. Like, there's not a depth of knowledge and experience that gets built up that allows somebody to know that they can use part X and instead of part Y, because part Y is 125% more expensive, and the difference between those prices is this entire profit for the week, right? I mean, it's
I grew up with my father working for the same company for 44 years, right? And, of course, young, not as many years, but he was there the whole time I grew up. So, but by the time he passed away, he'd been there for 44 years. I remember going up there on a Saturday, and he worked up in where he was blind in one eye. He got shot. He's the poster child for when the parents tell you not to play with BB guns because you can put somebody's eye out. So his brother was shooting at glass jars at ricocheted, hit him right in the pupil, and he blinded him in an eye when he was a kid. So he's blind in one eye, and but he mixed the colors for them. He could do better than the damn computer could for making paint match colors. But I've been up at that factory before and seen him stand there mixing colors, and you look over at the production line where they're pouring it in the cans, and you call Bentley over, as the old man that ran the production. He said, "Something's wrong with that." And he said, "Why?" He goes, "Oh, that's this paint, and it's too thin coming. I can hear it from here. It sounds wrong. Like, something's wrong with that batch. Go check that." And he's just like, because certain things have certain sounds, right? There's certain speeds.
What do you mean
out.
You can hear the paint, right?
Bentley just looked at him, never said a word to him, just go over there and double check it. And sure enough, they forgot to put something in there, right? It just sounded wrong. And because they have it's just certain things have certain sounds and stuff. I've done the same thing. My grandfather worked in a machinery called Patty Precision. They made the bomb launchers for airplanes, like the thing that held onto the bomb and let it out of the plane. And he used to tell me all the time that he could walk through that factory and tell you if one of the machines are going to break because the way it was making noises and vibrating, right? His job was the foreman. He took care of all those machines and stuff. And he said that boss loved him because he could catch things weeks and months before they go down. Bearings going out in a machine or whatever, he could just tell it by the way the machine vibrated. These days,
but Ron, that doesn't count, because I'm going to have a general manager run my business for me, and I'm going to
hire him off the street.
I'm not going to have to put any hours in on this business. Again, the naivete of, if you've sat in that chair, that great employees fall in love and move to Alaska, or they get tired of looking at your face and they quit, or you suddenly had a plan and now you're sitting at the office at midnight stuffing envelopes because the person who was right. I mean, that's ownership.
Like Tyson said, everybody has a plan until I punch him in the face, right?
That's right. That's right.
that business is going to punch you in the face at some point, and you're going to be there. And that's what I tell people, all these guys, all these operators. I was like, look, at some point, you're going to find yourself in that office on that site, trying to hire the next CEO and stuff, and you're going to realize it doesn't happen overnight. There's a reason why these executive search firms take 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, 18 months to find a great operator. It's because, great operators aren't unemployed. They're not looking for jobs. They're not knocking on your door. They're working for somebody else. You can't just go pick one up on the street. You got to steal one. You got to entice them to come from something else that's running well. So that process takes time, and they don't get it, right? They think they're just going to, I'm going to buy this and slap our operator in there, and then it's just going to run really great. And I was like, cool, who is he? How long has he worked there? No, I'm going to go hire one. It's like, okay.
Or even if they're lucky enough to find a business that has an operator in it, you had better walk through that door with a level of humility
Mm-hmm.
and supportiveness and open ears to listen to that operator. Because if you walk through the door as the new bull in the china shop, well, guess what that operator can do? They can
Shut
go
it all
find a
down.
different job.
So let's talk a little bit about what kind of stuff you do to help business owners. How do they find you to get that help and that type of stuff?
Yeah. Best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. You can find me at exitoasis.com. What I do with owners is we work to change businesses and owners' approach to the business, so that we create a firm yes to those three questions we've been talking about. Create sellability in the business, whether or not you decide to sell. So, but yeah, to find me, LinkedIn, exitoasis.com. That's the way to do it.
Awesome. And if people could just remember one or two things from today's show, what would you want them to take as a takeaways?
To me, the biggest issue in this space, the biggest problem in this space is that we as owners wait too long to engage it. So my call out is always that. Stop waiting. I've got a real simple prescription for small business owners. Put in your calendar one lunch period a month where you're going to spend some time on this topic. Listen to how to exit, read an article, watch a YouTube video, do something to start to educate yourself about what does a sellable business look like? How do you sell a business? Take a little time to start to educate yourself. Over time, you're going to see that education start to produce dividends in the decisions you make and the impact it has on your business. Stop waiting, do something.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mike. And it's always a pleasure chatting with you. We'll call that a show. Hang out for just a second.
Thanks, Ron.
This episode of How to Exit is brought to you by Final Ascent, the boutique M&A firm helping lower middle market business owners achieve their ultimate exit. At Final Ascent, they know selling your business is one of the biggest decisions you'll ever make, and they've been in your shoes. Their team isn't just made of advisors. They're experienced business owners who have successfully navigated their own exits. Final Ascent specializes in preparing businesses for sale, building value, and connecting with a national network of qualified buyers who will compete for your business. They don't take on a client unless they're confident they can sell your business at the current market maximum value. Whether you're ready to sell now or planning for the future, they'll craft a roadmap tailored to your unique goals so that you can walk away with maximum value and a peace of mind. Start your journey today at Final Ascent. That's www.finalascent.com, because your next chapter starts with a successful exit.